Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. As we continue on in April, as we actually are ending April, we're reminded of community, finding our community. We had several guests this month share their insight about the importance of community with the context that they are surrounded by, and I appreciate each one of my guests. But I wanted to wrap up and kind of share my insight of this topic. I always find that when you think about finding a community, the word finding breeds the idea of value. We don't find things we don't really value. So a lot of times when we think about communities or the lack there is, um, I just, thinking back when I used to do events locally in the church I was attending, um, it was for the community. You know, there's an African proverb, and I've shared this in other podcast episodes this month with the other guests. And it reads, "If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others." Um, I feel that this kind of shares a lot of what I find true, at least personally. I do my best work when I slow down. I connect better when I slow down. I think all of us can share the experience when you feel rushed, when you can feel someone who's near you, a person who's there to help, check their watch a little bit too often. You don't feel so connected. Um, Today, I will be, like I said, be wrapping up the topic on community and how it impacts not only, um, those in groups, those who are struggling, those who are, but it impacts in various ways. And in regards to a lot of the context of this podcast, it can impact the way you see the world, how you react to it. It can also um, build barriers and not bridges when it comes to our communities. And also just looking back at some of our communities in the past and how they are today. But it is an important topic. I do feel that a lot of times we think communities are just organically grown when we're in. I guess as we're kids, we don't really recognize how much of an impact of having a community is versus not. But before I begin, I wanted to put a disclaimer. If you are in crisis, please seek appropriate professional help immediately. The new 988 Suicide Crisis Lifeline is available for those in the States, but like I said, I don't like reinventing the wheel. So wherever you are, find what communities may be helpful when you need that help. When you are needing to ask that question, that humbles us as adults. I need help. Maybe, um, maybe you're going as you're trying really, really hard, but now you can't. I encourage you to find help, and especially if you feel that it's something that you don't feel confident of your safety. Definitely seek immediate help. With that said, a Burmese proverb says, "If you take big paces, you leave big spaces." I think about in our lives, we kind of focus on the milestones. We focus on where we want to get to, but not where we are. I think a lot of times communities can be a safe place for us to grow in the in betweens. We're never where we want to be at times, or we're always going elsewhere. Um, So I do feel, at the very least, it may stop us from or prevent us from seeing the world around us. And I feel, especially being one who struggled with mental health issues and still struggle, just like that. This is something that I feel breeds the idea of, when you're at your lowest. Um, It's always about the little things, the micro decisions. I'm going to get up today. I'm gonna I'm gonna eat today. I'm gonna do one thing today. So at that moment, it may not seem a lot, but for the individual, it may seem a lot. And those micro decisions, those will build to something. A lot of times, I've seen to a habit and then eventually a goal. But that process, I feel, gets overlooked, and communities can provide that place. When I think about this proverb, I just think about a lot of the urgency and the times we miss out when life is always just going so fast that we don't get a moment to experience it. Um, One thing I brought up, like I think once um, this month, but it's something to be aware of. Is from Martin Luther King Jr. It says, "Never forget that everything Hitler did in Germany was legal." Um, in regards to in the not to get too much off topic, but during that time, Germany was facing, especially a lot of Germans, there was a lot of financial hardship. So to make it in another sense, misery loves company. But in regards to community, this can be a good thing if the person or the group of people are focusing on something that positive to build towards. But sometimes, um, when you have collective grief or collective struggle as a community, it can incite um, some things that, at least as us humans, we may not see as bad. It's someone's bad news is someone's good news. So, in regards to this quote, I just brought it up to kind of see that it's not always so black and white. It's not, oh, this person is bad, that person is good. It's not to start a debate or a political debate. It's just really to mention that a lot of times the notion that hurt people can be more accurate than we like to admit. Um, but I think also moving forward about civil rights movement and how this kind of paraphrased notion communities do not develop organically but intentionally. Um, I think about the many differences I have with people around me, people I work with, people who I go to church with, and sometimes it's surprising me. It surprises me that how we sometimes don't um, how we get along at all. Sometimes there's a lot of different biases that we hold on to, certain truths that we hold on to, um, and there's a lot of barriers. And unfortunately, those barriers are brought up intentionally. At the same notion, if you think about communities that may initially not liked each other, or a community of people who didn't like a certain part or certain individuals, um, that you can see the positive effect. Next month it'll be Mental Health Awareness Month, and uh, the theme for Revive Ministry this month is remembering our names. And I think there's something fundamentally true about someone's name. It kind of gives some baseline of their identity. It's a lot of times we get part of our identity in the experiences, the communities, the groups that we're in, but ultimately I'm still Robert. I think Mark Twain, when he was I remember Mark Twain and this quote to kind of keep this theme and this discussion, this thought moving forward. I think he mentions it this way. I do like how Mark Twain words is. It says kindness is the language which deaf can hear and the blind can see. It's intangible. You don't need to actually spell it out. Something about kindness and communities that can be a wonderful place that someone can actually can grow and to heal. Communities can be that, and then at the other end, it could also be something that brings out the hurt, which sometimes ends up hurting other people. And one question I might have asked or just thought of when I think about community is, what helped you find the community you are in today? Well, what helped me was asking those questions of self. What is important to me? Um, and really, it wasn't about um, anything particular. I think as we grow, we start to have different interests. We start to self-discover. But for me, what helped me find the community I'm in today um, is my values, and I think some of my values are connections and how we treat one another. I feel being seeing the damage it can have for those who are struggling, let's say, with mental health issues and feeling unsupported, undervalued, and feeling stuck. And For me, I do find being in a community that values that we don't kick someone who is down. Those kind of things are important to me. Now, what characteristics of the community helped you stay? Well, it's simple. I don't expect people to um, have not have no biases. We do have struggles of certain contexts in our upbringing, but more, um, I think it's just the follow up, the willingness to understand or to uh, agree to disagree. I do feel that the notion of that knowledge or understanding alone is what denotes value. I think it's how we treat one another that matters. I think um, when you think of Sean Stevenson, he says communication is merely exchange of information, but connection is an exchange of our humanity. And I feel today we have a lot of information, but not much to do with it. But connection is lacking. We have a lot of means to communicate, but we don't. So I think of that when I think about finding our community and what does that defining what the community actually means. Kurt Vonnegut says that today, what should young people do with their lives today? Many things, obviously, but most daring thing is to create stable communities in which a terrible disease of loneliness can be cured. Obviously, it's a notion that I guess what surprises me about this is that it's actually being said more. Loneliness in itself, for me, I felt like was said in the way of weakness. If you're lonely, there's a reason you are lonely. But I do appreciate Kurt mentioning that it is definitely something that many of us struggle with, and I feel if there is a struggle with communicating or connecting um, and finding that connection in our communities, or even finding a community, I think this is something that makes me think about the importance of finding that community and also understand the environment we're in today. A lot of times on the same notion, there's an anonymous quote. It says, "Being human is given, but keeping our humanity is a choice." I think that's a little broad and obviously interpreted, and there's a lot of interpretations of that. But I think it kind of goes by the whole idea going back to what we said before, that communities do not develop organically but intentionally. So also the notion that when we connect, when we're able to connect, it kind of reminds us of our um, humanity in the sense of how we treat and value ourselves and others. There's a question that I might have asked. Not I just thought of it. Was what habits have you seen or implemented that have helped you find and maintain community in your life? I would say not getting stuck for me. Like there's certain things I don't personally agree with, and things I said today maybe some of the people listening may not agree with, but that's kind of the point. There's a process to understanding. I'm not saying everything I said is or will say will be correct, but really the whole reason I'm even discussing this and having this topic this month is that there is important that we have community, and that's the whole point of communities need to be developed intentionally. Kind of begs the question that it needs, there's definitely um, a learning curve to it. You know, um, on the another side of this is there's also lessons and one of the one of the questions I said was, what have been the biggest lessons that you learned or learning when it comes to the importance of community? Well, I think community is important, but so is yourself. So if you're not taking care of yourself and your need for the community is supersedes your own self-care or what is important to your that is not what I'm talking about. Finding a community that um, holds you that promotes that in you, that that says, are you really struggling? I remember we had a guest that said sometimes he would go through his phone log and just text people about what he appreciates about them. Um, Surprisingly enough, I thought it was a very interesting way of doing it. A lot of times we don't realize how much people don't realize how valued they are. I know that's kind of redundant, but you may be great at the piano, you may be great at singing, you may be great at things, but there's something about being heard from those who you care about, those who you love, that say, I really appreciate you doing that. I appreciate this or that. And, the assumption is that, well, they probably know because they're really good at it. I would say probably not. A lot of times people don't really recognize the positive aspects of their lives themselves. But biggest lesson I'm still learning is that thing about community is also can be learned to not have one. I guess it sounds weird to say it that way, but I know sometimes I may have a falling out, or I may be going through something that's fairly hard, and then I have to move away from the community or just step back a little bit. The problem is about that is if I don't really flush out or really think about what that process is and what the purpose of it is, I mean, the process of being without becomes more and more appealing, and the process of going back into community seems less and less appealing. Um, so my notion of stepping back, even if it was something that was not sustainable, or maybe an environment that I need to shift, maybe there's a seasons of life, it's just filling that space with something. And I feel that something is going to be something of a process. So like we said in the beginning, or like I said in the beginning, um, that it's a micro decision. So sometimes you have to work the problem, as I say. So you say, I am moving from this community and I need to step away from this community because I can't sustain it. Maybe work's getting hard, maybe you have some personal issues, maybe it's just far, or whatever the case may be, or it's just not practical anymore. But now you have this time that you spend a lot of time in the other community. Um, it's important, at least for me, from my experience, is to find a way to work that problem, work that solution, work towards a solution to that problem. The problem is that, we do need to connect, whatever that looks like. So just because I'm getting better at connecting less doesn't mean it's better for me. We may get comfortable, but sometimes comfortability doesn't mean that I'm doing better. And I feel that's where it gets kind of blurred. So at least that's something I'm still learning. Obviously, it's nuances of that. Um, Bulgarian proverb says, "Tell me who your friends are, so I can tell you who you are." Well, kind of the notion is that we are kind of our friend groups, our community, do reflect a bit about who we are. I wouldn't say as a whole, but we do. There's definitely a portion of us that identifies to this group or that group. Um, so, like going through all that and thinking about the idea of finding community, I think um, it may seem like a lot of disjointed ideas. It may seem like, well, I'm in a community. I'm doing fine. I don't need a community. Uh, I do feel that it's ongoing process, and I feel sometimes when we have the idea that we've made it into a community, we can kind of sometimes, like in the beginning, kind of stride forward, thinking um, that we made it. So, and like the Burmese proverb, when we like, I'm just making big strides to all these great and grand milestones. But I would say, at least for me, it's the seasons of life, the changes that happen within yourself, within your family, just in life in general. May cause may prompt a change, and sometimes that change can be desirable, it can be undesirable, but the idea is that we're not finite human beings that stay at the same level at any given moment. I think it's important to understand or recognize the little details. And also, for me, is just reframing and understanding what supports I do have out there and what supports I don't have. What are my strengths and what are not my strengths? What are and I guess putting some time and space aside for me or you or whoever to reflect on what is valuable and what communities are important to me. Um, the notion of misery loves company is a common one, but it's we desire to be connected even when we argue together. However, when you take time to think about what is important when it comes to community, if you go through that down that whole path of understanding and connections and what is important, um, sometimes the distractions of life let us forget that we may just want to be connected around people that we care about. Is it so necessary that they are the same mind as us, or they feel or respect or think the same way? I personally would say no. I feel like from my experience, and also just by the unlikely event that someone thinks and feels or have the same value and context, I think sometimes you may be waiting a while to find that community. So, thinking about final thoughts, I would say, um, it goes back to I kind of a lot of times when I think about being a leader in church, helping in certain roles, certain ideas, and certain themes kind of came to the surface. So a lot of times an element in Christian faith is, there's God and there's his people, his followers, but um, it's how we relate to God. A lot of times it's how we relate to ourselves and to others. So um, not to overgeneralize or try to um, make a mountain over a molehill, I think this illustration helps a bit. It's a two-part one. The first part is how we see God, or how we see something bigger than us. Those who are not faith-based, those from other faiths, can understand the notion of a higher power. How we see that higher power is how, usually, not always, how we treat even ourselves and those around us. So if the higher power, for instance, is like of the gods of Homer's Odyssey, or just gods in general that have a very vindictive or jealous or angry tone, we will respond to how we feel a higher power would see us, or react to us. Now, this is not to make light of faith or religion, but let's go through the realm of Christian. So if God is a distant God, then we would think that then we'll value, in the sense that we will think that how we treat people is best when we treat them at a distance. And another notion is, if God is how you say a wrathful God that will condemn those who go against him, and there's portions of that, then you may treat yourself and others the same way. And this is not a theological debate, it's just more about how we may respond in that context. So that's one notion. And obviously I'm just saying that as context, that even as a child, when we look at our parents, they are above us, so we there's a lot of weight on that, on how our relationship to them will impact how we relate to others. But more so, I think about going back to the Good Samaritan. And I'll end with that final thought. A lot of people get appalled at the people walking on each side of the Good Samaritan, but I also just think about questions. I think sometimes questions tells us more than the answer to that parable. The question being, who is my neighbor? Which stems from the idea of setting clear lines of who and what people they would deem worthy enough to be part of their community. Now, this is not a podcast to proselytize or to share in any aspect of. I'm just sharing from my context what I've heard, what I've experienced, what I've heard, and what I feel is important. When we think about finding community, it's really reflective of how we see the world, whether you are faith-based or not. It's important to reflect on what's important to you, and also, understand that, there is something to the idea of community. I encourage those who have been listening, those who listen to the other episodes, to listen to those again, and also just to take a moment and to think about the communities that you're around today. A lot of times when I start this podcast, I start out with the disclaimer, the whole 988 Suicide Crisis Lifeline for those in the States. At the very least, if none of this really clicks to you when it comes to communities, I would say find one or two people that you can contact, that if you are really, really struggling, that you could say, I need help. The idea is that, just like the whole Burmese proverb, wherever you're at today, right? Those little micro steps, just waking up, going up, getting out of bed, those things could be the most important ones. more so than the milestones, because those are things that build you to those goals. Granted, this is the context from my own experience, but as I said, communities and how we connect can play a big impact on how we see the world and how we react to the world. So I thought this topic and was and is still important today. So I just want to say thank you for all those who have been listening. Thank you to all the guests, and thank you for um, continuing the dialogue. The idea is that we don't have all the answers. The idea is that we keep talking about them. Like I said, sometimes the questions that we ask give us more than the answers that we're looking for. So as we wrap up, Revive, I just want to implore. I just want to say, Revive Ministry, to stay updated. Go to the various platforms. Right now, really, our website is a hub. You can listen to the audio versions on one of the pages, or you can even just go to YouTube and look us up, reviveministrycfl.com, and you can find out more about the video versions of these podcasts. Again, this is goodbye from Revive Ministry Podcast, leaving you with this last quote of wisdom from, it's a Czech proverb. It says, "Do not protect yourself by fences, but rather by your friends." We are not islands, as old saying goes. So I just encourage those who are out there, be kind, not only to those around you, but to yourself. And thank you.